for her friendship and partnership on so many issues. I want to thank my fellow Muslim caucus members, Andre Carson and Rashida Tlaib, and to Chui Chu, who has been just really one of the greatest leaders, I think, and a friend to the Muslim community there could be in Congress, and to all of the other members who have lent their solidarity to this important effort. We are here because we are seeing a stark rise in anti-Muslim hate in this country. According to a brand new data from CARE, this year has seen over 500 documented complaints of anti-Muslim hate and bias in the US reported to them. This includes everything from hate crimes, harassment, school bullying, discrimination, hate speech, anti-mosque incidents, and a sudden uptick in mosque attacks in May and in June. In May, there was an attempted stabbing of a security guard at an Islamic center in Falls Church, Virginia. In California, an Islamic center was vandalized with pro-Trump graffiti. The perpetrators also burned the alam, a red and white flag that symbolizes peace and justice in the Shia faith tradition. And of course, hate speech is rampant. In Oregon, a 68-year-old Afghan worker was abused with anti-Muslim slurs and belted with items while working at a local gas station. In New Jersey, a school board vice president repeatedly shared anti-Muslim posts on Facebook, including one that showed a Muslim man asking a Buddhist monk, "Why do you pray to a rock?" before showing the man praying to Kaaba in Mecca. And in my own home state of Minnesota, vandals spray painted hate messages including "Death to Islam," "F Islam," the N-word, and a Nazi swastika on and near the Moorhead Fargo Islamic Center. A window of the mosque was also broken. This is only the most recent in a spat of mosque attacks in our state. These incidents pain me because they are so familiar. As a young refugee who barely spoke English, students mocked me, even going as far as chewing gum on my hijab. At one point, I was physically attacked by a group of teenagers because I didn't bare my legs or arms during gym class. And this has followed me even as I ran for public office and represent my district in the United States Congress. Just last month, my office got a call saying, "Muslims are terrorists, she's a rackhead N-word, and very anti-American communist piece of shit that works for her. And I hope you get that what is effing coming for you." This is one of the many threats me and my staff receive on a routine basis. So I feel this pain on a deeply personal level. But I know that the discrimination many Muslims experience is not unique to the United States. It is a global phenomenon. Just last month, a man deliberately drove a pickup truck into a group of Muslim pedestrians in Ontario, Canada, killing 4 members of a single family, including a 74-year-old Talet Afzar and her 15-year-old granddaughter, Yumna Afzal. Her 9-year-old brother, Fayaz, was left orphaned. From India to China to Myanmar, we are seeing systematic crackdowns on Muslim civil rights. Earlier this year, the UN Human Rights Council announced that anti-Muslim hatred around the world has reached epic proportions and called on countries to take all necessary measures to combat direct and indirect forms of discrimination. Thankfully, we have an administration that takes this issue seriously. President Biden reversed the hateful Muslim ban on day one and made it clear that Muslims are part of the fabric of this country. But we must go farther. It is for this reason that we are calling on the State Department to create a special envoy to combat Islamophobia and to include state-sponsored Islamophobic violence and impunity for Islamophobic violence in next year's annual human rights reports. I will also be introducing legislation that gives this envoy the force of law. It is time for us as policymakers to treat these problems as interconnected and genuinely global. I will also add, we know that this increase in hate is not only happening to Muslims. Church bombings, synagogue attacks, racial hate crimes are also on the rise. We will not defeat hate with more hate. We will defeat it with solidarity. And now I would like to introduce my colleague and friend, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky.
Thank you so much for that eloquent message. I am so proud to join with my colleague and friend Ilhan Omar to today send a letter to the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, urging him to create this special envoy for monitoring and combating Islamophobia. And as my colleague, Congresswoman Omar said, we are going to continue to push to end this kind of discrimination. So for over a decade, we have seen incredible incitement of violence against and Islamophobia worldwide. From the atrocities being committed against the Uyghurs in China, the Rohingya in Burma, to the acts in New Zealand and Canada, all around the world. And this is this. Okay. Earlier this year, as was mentioned, the United Nations issued a report saying that anti-Muslim hatred around the world is reaching epidemic proportions. And we can do something about it. Muslims around the world are facing discrimination, hostility, and violence, some even state-sponsored. I have heard from Muslims in my district that they too have feared discrimination in both the public and private spheres. And I also know that I also have in my district the largest number of Rohingya people, the largest population in the United States, who continue to face stress and anxiety and fear after escaping the horrors in Burma. This is truly a global issue. We must do everything that we can to combat this hatred and push for policies that fully respect the human rights and dignity and the religious rights and cultural freedom of the Muslim people. And we must urge our counterparts abroad to do the same. And so I am just very proud to be here today. I stand here before you as a Jewish American who understands that kind of discrimination. There is already a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. We urge the president to actually support someone to fill that position. But equally needed right now is that we have a special envoy to represent and fight for and to fight against Islamophobia. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. And now I would like to introduce another leader on this issue who led the No Ban Act in the House, Congresswoman Judy Chu.
First, let me thank Congress member Ilhan Omar for her leadership in calling for a special envoy for monitoring and combating Islamophobia. I want to thank her for organizing this letter and for today's press conference. The cruel prejudice and abuse that Muslims around the world have experienced and continue to experience is a problem that we cannot ignore. When we are silent in the face of blatant religious prejudice, we allow hate to become action. I know because we've seen it right here in the US of A. I will never forget the day that the former president's hateful Muslim ban went into effect and the chaos and pain that it caused. As soon as I heard the news, I rushed to LAX to help and was shocked by how deliberately harmful this policy was, something that continued to become clear over the subsequent years as far too many families were separated. That is why I'm so grateful President Biden ended this policy on his first day in office. But the anti-Muslim hostility that led to it still exists, which is why I'm so proud that this April, the House did pass my No Ban Act to ensure that no other president can implement such a discriminatory ban ever again. When prejudice becomes policy, we have to speak up. That's why I believe we must speak out against Islamophobic actions and policies all around the world. The violent repression of Uyghurs and Rohingya, the prejudice against Muslim minorities in India, Pakistan, and elsewhere, the shootings at mosques like the one in Christchurch, the murder of a Muslim family in Canada, and so many other examples around the world highlight the danger Muslims face when we allow Islamophobia to go unchecked. But we can help. The U.S. has the world's most powerful loudspeaker to use to champion the rights of others. And that is what we are calling for today. By creating a new position to monitor and combat international Islamophobia, just as we have done for other communities, we can help fight this cruel prejudice and ensure a safer world for all of us.
Thank you, Judy. And now I would like to introduce the Dean of the Muslim Caucus, my brother, Congressman Andre Carson.
Thank you, Ilhan, for your leadership, your passion, your brilliance, and your fearlessness in all that you've had to endure up until this point. We're so proud of you. To Representative Schakowsky, thank you, Madam Chair. To Judy Chu, Sister Rashida, Representative Jacobs, and Brother Nihad, I'm honored to join my colleagues in leading this effort to prevent Islamophobia around the world. Together, my colleagues and I, especially Representatives Omar and Schakowsky, I want to thank them for leading the letter to Secretary Blinken and all of us for acting as co-signers. I think it truly takes a village, a global village, to push back on the discrimination, violence, and abuse that Muslims are experiencing worldwide. As the world's most powerful nation and the one that is rooted in the principle of justice for all, America must lead efforts to protect vulnerable Muslims, whether they're in Palestine, Myanmar, New Zealand, India, China, the US, or anywhere else. We must protect them wherever they are threatened and wherever their human rights are violated. The rise in hatred is also a part of the rapid spread of far-right extremism and white supremacy. We are using our platforms in Congress, and certainly those of us who serve on the House Intel Committee, to urge our intelligence community to take this threat much more seriously. Similarly, with the creation of a special envoy to prevent Islamophobia, it will go far in helping to stop the spread of hatred, hopefully. We urge Secretary Blinken to utilize America's immense influence through the creation of this envoy. It's a matter of human rights. It's a matter of religious freedom. And it's a matter of life and death. We must act now.
And now I would like to introduce one of our newest members of the Progressive Caucus, Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Omar and Schakowsky, for your steadfast leadership on this important issue. I stand with my Muslim siblings experiencing Islamophobia and violence here at home and around the globe. We cannot ignore this dramatic and disturbing rise in violence towards Muslims. And we also cannot ignore how it's linked to the rise in white supremacy around the world. Just yesterday, back home in San Diego, where I'm proud to represent, a man pleaded guilty to setting fire to a mosque and, soon after, attacking the Chabad synagogue where he killed a beloved member of our community. We know that Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are deeply linked. And as a Jewish woman, I reject efforts to pit these two against each other. None of us are free unless we are all free. That's why I'm joining my colleagues to call on the Secretary of State to appoint a special envoy for monitoring and combating Islamophobia, just as there's one to combat anti-Semitism. And I join my colleague Jan Schakowsky in urging President Biden to make sure that position gets filled. As President Biden says, we don't lead the world because of the example of our power. We do so by the power of our example. So thank you again, Congress members Omar, Schakowsky, Chu, and Carson for your work and leadership on this issue. I look forward to working together to elevate and prioritize the fight against Islamophobia, both around the world and right here at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And lastly, I would like to introduce Nihad Awad, the co-founder and executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, who can talk about the uptick in hate that we are seeing.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Representative Omar for her leadership and applaud her for her courage and pray for her safety because she represents so much for America and the Muslim community. She has endured abuse in the face of confronting bigotry, Islamophobia, and the injustice that's around us and around the world. And also I would like to thank Representative Schakowsky for her leadership to lend a voice and support for the creation of this very important office. And our dear brother Andre Carson, the Dean of Muslim Congress People, more to come. And Representative Jacob for lending a voice and support for this very important initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, the organization that I represent, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is the largest Muslim civil rights and liberty organization. We have been monitoring and combating anti-Muslim bias incidents and Islamophobia for the past 27 years. But in the past a few months, we have seen an uptick in the number of cases against the Muslim community. Attacks on mosques, attacks on Muslim students in schools, more cases of discrimination in the workplace. There are many, many cases to enumerate and to talk about. I refer you to see the report that we are issuing today, the mid-year report of the incidents of 2021 on our website, www.cair.com. Some of these attacks are also including mosques, arson attacks on mosques, similar to that we have seen attacks on churches and synagogues by the same bigoted individuals, but different targets. Same source of bigotry, the same kind of attackers, but we have different targets. They are united in their bigotry, and we have to be united in our response and rejecting these attackers against our faith communities and against our racial communities. In the past a few months, we have seen an uptick in those numbers. More than 500 cases our national office, which is just a few blocks away, received. In the past year, 2020, we have seen a 9% increase in the cases. We recorded about 6,000 anti-Muslim bias incidents. In the past 3 years, we have recorded 10,000 cases. These are almost astronomical numbers compared to the numbers that we have to research and document in the previous years before the Trump administration. Ladies and gentlemen, Islamophobia should not be normal. I can tell you that many Muslims around this country and around the world, those who live as minorities, they started to feel that Islamophobia is part of the normal life. It should not, and we should not accept it. Islamophobia is a danger and threat not only to Muslims, but to all our societies and to the peace of our communities. And that's why the creation of this important office at the State Department sends a clear message that it is not okay to be Islamophobic. It is not okay to discriminate against people because of their faith tradition. It is not okay again to discriminate against people because of their ethnicities. And the United States elected officials and the State Department sends clear and loud message that this will not be tolerated unless we see an end to bigotry at home and abroad. I would like to conclude by saying we have been calling for the creation of this office for the past 20 years. We asked for the Bush administration to do it. I'm so glad and hopeful that this might happen under the leadership of Joe Biden and with the effort and support of members of Congress like the ones that we have here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nihad.